Welcome to episode 121 of the G2 on 5G. It's the latest insight scoop on everything 5G. We cover 6 topics in about 20 minutes, and it's brought to you by More Insights and Strategy. I'm Will Townsend, and joining me again this week is fellow analyst Anshel Sag. Let's get started with my first topic, and I want to talk about the T-Mobile for Business Analyst Summit. So Anshel, you and I and Patrick Moorhead, our principal, attended in Seattle last week. And it was about a day and a half filled with a lot of information. And from my perspective, this was really T-Mobile for Business's coming out party. So they've been focused on putting a strategy together and assembling a portfolio over the last 18 or so months. I had 3 big key takeaways. I don't want to steal any of your thunder, but let me just sort of share my 3 big takeaways. One, I'm very impressed with the bench strength that the management team has pulled together. Callie Field is the president of T-Mobile for Business. She was a former executive that led the customer care organization. But they've added some additional folks. Their chief network officer is actually a former Ericsson fellow who had a hand in helping to write the 5G new radio 3GPP standard. So that's quite impressive. And they've also recently hired earlier this year in January, February, a sales leader from Verizon. And I was very impressed with his overall plan, both a focus on channel partners and systems integrators, as well as the traditional direct sales. And so, number one, I really think the team has built the right bench strength to take it to the next level. Secondly, I was very impressed as John Saw spent some time with us, taking us through some of the very innovative 5G use cases that are both enterprise and consumer focused. We've talked about Halo in the past. That's that remote piloted micro rental that is running in Las Vegas, that is powered by T-Mobile's layer cake full spectrum footprint. And so John shared some additional use cases there. You may talk to some of the AR and VR ones. But then I think third, I was very impressed when their chief network officer was talking about the speed of their site upgrades. So they're upgrading their sites to the tune of over 1,000 a week. And I even heard that number sometimes is peaking at the 1,500 site level per week. And they're using lean methodology to do that. And they sort of call it a factory approach. So, from my perspective, those are my big 3 takeaways. But I came away feeling, very impressed that they have the right plan and they have the right resources in place to really make a run at it. But what are your thoughts?
I think I pretty much agree with everything you said.
Yeah.
I'd also add that in my conversations that I had with Ulf Evolson, formerly of Ericsson,
The
um,
CEO. Yep.
he mentioned that he was one of the people who coined the term network slicing, which you and I are big fans of.
Right.
And it, there was definitely more talk about standalone, I think. That was a strong technological perspective. It almost felt like T-Mobile had it was almost talking about standalone in the past tense, as opposed to a lot of its competitors like Verizon, who we'll be talking about later.
Yeah.
But I also really agree with you that I feel like they've really pulled a strong team together, at least on the executive level, and I'm sure moving downward from there. And I just feel like they've really taken their time with T-Mobile for Business in a way that didn't feel rushed, like they were just trying to get a team together for the sake of having a team. And it also seems like they're all really gelling well together, and they seem very jovial with one another. And I think there's a lot of mutual respect within the executive leadership, which I think is very important for people to work together and to be successful. And other than that, I'm very impressed with what I've seen, like to your point on the sales side, as well as go to market. And I really think it's going to be interesting to see how this gets executed, and what kind of customers and what kinds of big announcements will be coming down the pipe as they continue to move down this this path of building this big part of their business, which previously just did not exist before.
It didn't, right? So they were very consumer focused, obviously, and that was one of my big criticisms very early on. That was well before the merger with Sprint. I think the other thing to note is that at Mobile World Congress Americas, they announced the next evolution of their advanced network services with a focus on industries and 4 key verticals. And taking that and then adding what they're doing with their TIoT initiative, I think the combination of those two elements is going to serve as a nice on-ramp for them into the enterprise and to differentiate themselves. But at the same time, they're going to have to convince mid-market and very large enterprise customers that they're credible, because they haven't been in those key markets in the past. And I posed that to the chief marketing officer for T-Mobile for Business as well. And so I think you're going to see a lot of focus around co-advertising and that sort of thing. And it's no secret that Alaska Airlines is a big customer, and that's very visible and out there today. But I think we'll begin to see more of those really, really big sort of logos, as I like to call them. But yeah, I think it was exciting. And I believe you and I and Patrick, we may be collaborating on a Forbes article that captures some additional insights. But let's move to your first topic this week. You did talk about the semiconductor export restrictions last week, but you want to go into a little more detail this week.
Yeah, so basically now the export restrictions are going into place. And we're seeing the legal departments of companies like ASML sending out emails to their US employees telling them that they need to cease all activities and communications with specific Chinese customers.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting is that other companies like Applied Materials have said that the export restrictions will prevent it from making roughly $400 million in the fourth quarter. So that's a considerable amount of money that they'll be losing due to these export restrictions. And I have a feeling that this is going to result in some chip shortages as well. There's a chip company in China called YMTC, which is a leading supplier of memory technologies, generally inexpensive memory. And Apple was planning to use that in the iPhone, I believe, in China.
Yeah.
And I believe now that they cannot. So
right.
There's a lot of things I think are kind of being processed and understood. For example, green card holders that are not U.S. citizens are still U.S. persons, and they have to make the decision of giving up their U.S. residency or U.S. person status, or to keep their jobs in China. So there's a lot of really interesting developments that are occurring as a result of this. But my understanding is that right now, a lot of the Korean suppliers are getting a 1-year reprieve, so they can figure things out. But the straight up American companies supplying straight to Chinese factories and semiconductor manufacturers are getting cut off entirely. So
okay.
It's becoming more of a challenging atmosphere for a lot of these companies. And I think that it's probably going to be 6 to 12 months until we fully realize the extent of what these restrictions will do. But the one thing that has been made abundantly clear is that I think I said abundantly, but it might have come out as abundantly. Abundantly clear is that China will not be able to continue to gain ground on the US or other countries when it comes to semiconductor manufacturing and building chips as a whole.
Yeah.
And I think this is a very clear indication of the Biden administration, and I assume other components of the US security apparatus, wanting to ensure that China does not have equal capabilities when it comes to computing, specifically when it comes to supercomputing, because there were also a lot of restrictions that were put on for supercomputer size and computing density, types of chips that could be utilized in a supercomputer. what the
Right.
definition of a supercomputer is. So all kinds of things like that. But I think right now we're just figuring this out, and we're figuring more out this week. Um, but I think there's still a lot more time that will take to shake out exactly how big of an impact this will have in the industry. And I unfortunately think it will increase prices,
Yeah.
um, and probably restrict supply, which could continue to, create a chip shortage.
Right. It's interesting. So this restriction on supercomputing platforms isn't anything new. It's been around for quite some time, and there are obviously national security concerns around doing that. But yeah, I've been doing a little bit of research here, and China's position is that yes, by restricting their ability to be able to participate in the supply chain, that will increase prices, and also it will stifle innovation. I mean, in the latter is something that Huawei has been, speaking to for the last, couple of years, especially when all of this started with the Trump administration, with the entity listing, and the restrictions and that sort of thing. So yeah, I do agree with you. In the short term, it's probably going to constrict supply. It's probably going to increase, bill of material costs. Will it stifle innovation? That's yet to be determined. But it's the world that we live in. So it is what it is. But let's move to my second topic this week, and I want to talk about Reliance. And they made an announcement just recently that they're teaming up with Ericsson and Nokia to help build their 5G network. And what's interesting is that they have aims and designs to build a 5G standalone network.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in contrast to Bharti Airtel, that is going down a non-standalone path for its 5G, for its initial 5G deployment. They'll probably, get to SA, over time. But as I look at that and I sort of read between the lines, that indicates to me, and you just mentioned network slicing. You can only achieve network slicing in a standalone network when you match core with RAN and transport and all that good stuff.
Yep.
And so clearly, from my perspective, what that indicates to me is that Reliance is going to definitely focus on enterprise services and the slicing opportunity, because that's a huge monetization opportunity for them. And Bharti, and they're going to spend an incredible amount of money doing that, man. It's like I read like it's 2 trillion, is it rupees? I mean, I hope I'm not getting their denomination of currency incorrect there.
No, it's correct. It's very inflated.
But yeah, so I mean that's an incredible number. And certainly Reliance has the capability to do that as the largest carrier in India. But yeah, it'll be interesting. But their plans are to deliver India's first standalone network, and they're picking 2 great partners, in my opinion, with Ericsson and Nokia. But what are your thoughts?
I think that this is a natural approach. I think, when you look at some of the biggest carriers in the world, a lot of them are dual sourcing Nokia and Ericsson.
Yeah.
And I think this is a natural progression. I do think that the approach that Bharti Airtel is taking is likely going to hurt them long term.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that they're probably doing it for cost saving reasons.
Sure.
Because I mean, let's be honest, NSA was supposed to be like a baby step to
Right.
SA, right? And when the first 5G standard was created, there was no NSA. NSA was added to make it easier. Kind of like how there's like an on ramp, right? Like the on
Yeah.
ramp was steep, and they tried to make it a little bit less steep, a little shallower on ramp with NSA.
Right.
And as a result, we're still struggling with NSA, and it's first networks launched 2019, and we're in 2020, so it's been 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
I think we could do better, in my opinion, but I just think standalone is the right way to go.
Yeah.
I think when you look at what's going on with Geo, they clearly understand the value of going with a clean new network. They did it with 4G, and
Yeah.
it seems like they're trying to repeat this strategy once again with 5G. And I think it's
Mm-hmm.
going to pay dividends, especially in the enterprise applications. And as they try to start creating these network slices and offering them as services, I think they're going to monetize their network a lot more quickly than Airtel will. So
Yep.
that's my opinion.
Yeah, no, you and I are of the same opinion. And, it's interesting too, because I believe that's going to allow Reliance to get into the private cellular networking game much more quickly when other operators in India aren't as bullish on it. And so, and there's a lot of pushback from the operators in general around democratizing licensed spectrum, like we've seen in the U.S. with OnGo, because obviously they want to lock up all of that spectrum so they can monetize it. So there are a lot of interesting kind of things going on in the Indian market. But it's going to be, pop the popcorn. It's going to be fun to watch this and report back on it on future podcasts. But let's move to your second topic this week. You want to talk about Charter, and they've announced a new $50 internet and wireless bundle.
Yeah, so Charter, as you know, has both a wireline and a wireless business now.
Yeah.
And they announced called um, this new deal called Spectrum One, which is $50 a month for 12 months. So it's a promotionary deal, and it offers 300 megabits of wireline, and it's basically a way for them to try and woo people back from fixed wireless home offers, which are $50 or less.
Yeah.
And they say that they're going to try to get customers back. The problem is that they're not really talking about what happens after 12 months.
Right.
So this sounds very much like one of those cable promotion deals that go up quite a bit. The guys and gals over at Fierce Wireless said that it was an $85 a month if they're separately purchased. So that's probably where it'll go. Actually, Monica wrote this article, but I think that the article states that separately these services will be $85, and as this deal is, it's $50. So it's a good deal. It's almost half off.
Yeah.
But the question is, how long does that last, and do people want that? Because Verizon might be offering a promotionary deal, but T-Mobile's offering $50 a month, no contract, no specials. So
yeah,
this is still going to probably, I think, pull some customers, but I think that long term, they're going to just have to be competitive on price and service. And if they can't be, they're going to continue to lose customers as they have over the last, year and a half or 2 years. So
yeah,
it's going to be very interesting to see, but it's interesting that this is, creating more competition and offering consumers better price.
Yeah, the traditional cable companies, they've just been hammered over the years and, losing subscribers left and right. And I didn't catch this news this week. We're recording a little bit late this week because, I've been traveling so much, but I just have a quick question. So what is the internet service platform that they're offering? Is it standard cable?
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I thought. So yeah,
it's just a new bundle.
Yeah. So, big deal. You've got T-Mobile, very aggressively promoting FWA, which they did claim. I didn't mention this earlier, but at the analyst event, they did claim that they're claiming now a nationwide FWA service, with their low band build out, and so that's quite impressive. It's easy to provision. It's easy to set up. To your point, it's $50. There are no strings attached. You can try it, I think, for 15 days. If you don't like it, you can cancel it, no penalty. So, hey, I don't blame Charter for putting a bundle together, but they're kind of putting lipstick on a pig, with respect to the cable internet service. But, time will tell. But let's move to my third and final topic, and I want to talk about Verizon. And I know you've got a lot to weigh in here because you and I were talking about this last week. But they've announced their commercial 5G SA core, and so what they're doing is they did announce that they're beginning to move commercial traffic over. This is a cloud platform. They call it Verizon Cloud Platform, or VCP. And what Verizon states is that they're leveraging a containerized cloud native architecture specifically designed to support telecom workloads. Say that fast, 3 times. And They're also stating that this is leveraging their extensive edgification that they've built out that I've been critical of in the past, because it seems to me they're edgifying their network without really focusing on a use case, unlike some of their competitors like AT&T that have paired MEC with private networking to power use cases like manufacturing with General Motors. And so I'm going to leave it at that, but I know you want to weigh in on this.
Yeah, I think it's they say it's commercial, but it doesn't really feel like it's a commercial deployment.
No, no.
It definitely feels like it's more of a a bespoke deployment. And
Mhm.
I think when we actually see them giving a list of devices that are going to be compliant with their 5G SA core,
Right.
and or just being 5G SA compliant with their network, I think that's going to be when I really believe it. Because when T-Mobile started talking about Voner, they were like, okay, these devices can do Voner, right? Like this is where you can actually
Yeah.
test
Yes.
standalone. So
Yeah.
until we start getting those kinds of commitments, I'm not really convinced. But it's good to hear that they're starting to talk about standalone, because I think both AT&T and Verizon were initially very gung ho about standalone and then started backing off it
Yeah.
once they realized their deployments were going to be dependent on their coverage. So I think we're going to see a lot more talk about standalone next year from AT&T and Verizon.
Mhm.
And very likely it'll be in the second half, but they probably might even tee it up in the first half.
Right.
But by then, I think T-Mobile will be fully standalone at that point, and they'll be maybe a year or so behind.
Yeah, well, by about the same time next year, T-Mobile should have their mid-band assets built out to support standalone. I call this racing stripes from Verizon's standpoint. They're wanting to get off the bench and they're wanting to stay, something around SA, just because, T-Mobile has been there for so long. AT&T is going to be a little more conservative in my mind. And at the end of the day, um, Verizon is still building out its RAN to support C-band. And so to your point, it's like, yeah, they've made an announcement here, but I don't want to call it smoke and mirrors, but it's a baby step, from my perspective. So any additional thought there before we move on to your topic, your third
No,
topic?
I think I've been critical of Verizon enough.
You beat that horse enough. I have too. So let's move to your third and final topic. And you want to talk about Open Signal, and they've been measuring some of the speeds on Verizon and AT&T's network as they build out their C-band assets. So that's a nice segue to end the podcast. But what are your
Yeah, a
thoughts?
little bit of a positive note.
Yeah,
Um, so C-band, obviously Verizon and AT&T's bid on the first block, A block spectrum. So they're splitting that first block together, and they're obviously rolling it out very quickly. But there was B block and C block, so T-Mobile won't have their C-band until much later, but they also don't need it. So
yeah.
what we're seeing is OpenSignal reported that between March and September of this year, AT&T's 5G download speeds went up 35%,
Okay.
while Verizon's went up 15%. So that kind of makes sense when you consider that Verizon already kind of started their C-band rollout in the beginning of this year,
Hmm.
and AT&T kind of started really pushing the envelope in the middle of the year, let's say May, June. So it makes sense that we would see AT&T see a bigger jump, and that's I think a component of AT&T rolling out its 3.45 as well as the C-band, that
Yeah.
dual rollout.
Yeah.
Um, and overall, they're saying that AT&T C-band has increased in reach to hit over 30% of 5G readings for AT&T, and then 50% for Verizon. So the coverage is actually improving,
Hmm.
but they're nowhere near where they should be or where they could be. But it's quite clear that they're getting some very real improvements. If you look at the individual spectrum itself without any kind of carrier aggregation, both companies are getting over 100 megabits out of their mid-band spectrum. AT&T is getting 112 megabits out of their 3.7 gigahertz, while Verizon's getting 160, which makes sense because they have more.
Yeah.
I think it's a 60-40 split.
Right.
And yeah, it's to be expected. I think we've been teeing this up since the beginning of the year. And I think, at the end of the year, we'll probably see a much more realistic landscape of what the competitive landscape is between T-Mobile, Verizon, and AT&T.
Yeah.
But the reality is they're all still lagging T-Mobile, and T-Mobile's network covers 70% of their 5G readings. So, and they have the low band as well. So it's really impressive what T-Mobile has done, and it's great to see AT&T and Verizon both starting to catch up as we expect that they would.
Yeah.
And I think we'll really see that manifest itself next year.
I agree, my friend. Well, hey, it's been another great podcast. Why don't you take us home?
Absolutely. We hope our viewers and listeners found this week's topics interesting. If anyone out there would like to provide insights on a specific 5G topic for a future podcast, please reach out to us on social media. Will is at Will Tech, and I'm at Anshel. We hope you have a great week, and please tune again next week.